In terms of public comment, are there any public comments on anything that we're not going to be talking about tonight that is on the agenda? I don't see anybody who wants to comment, so we'll move on to the next. The minutes, Meg and I just chatted about the minutes. It's her first time through, so she's got the minutes from our last meeting almost completed. She'll get those over to me and I can circulate them for the next meeting. And then she's going to go back and do the meeting before, which she's going to have to do off the video, which might be a bit challenging, but we'll help her through it. And so we're not going to be approving any minutes tonight, but next meeting, I hope that we can kind of get caught up with where we are on all the minutes. Okay, on to administrative matters. First is tomorrow morning is the Chamber of Commerce meeting, and I've been asked to do a briefing on what the Burlington Government Review Committee is doing, and to that group of people. The meeting's at 8:30 tomorrow morning. If anybody would like to join me in that, you're more than welcome to do so. Just let me know so I can get you the link. It's pretty much, my plan is to pretty much do what I presented at town meeting for those of you who got to see that, but it's a general overview of what we're doing. And I updated it to reflect kind of some of the progress that we've made in various and sundry fronts as well. And I don't know how many people are going to be actually at the meeting. That, you know, they obviously have a larger group. It's their Government Relations Committee, which is the group that I'll be talking to. And I'll let you know how that goes. Okay. Any questions about that? No? Okay, I don't see any, so I'll move on. Before we get into the subcommittee updates, I just want to do a reminder about the process that we're using. I think we're all on the same page, but I just want to make sure that, and Pat, you and Anthony can hop in if I say anything incorrectly about this process, because this is one that is where your expertise is. But the way we're doing this is that we've taken the current bylaws and special acts and kind of plugged them into or the Collins Center has plugged it into a template for a charter. And then we are going through each section where there are areas and reading it and then making areas that will make it more specific, to Burlington, and also recommendations of things that maybe we might want to change, or confirmation there are things we want to keep the same. So for example, one of the things we said we might want to change is the moderator term, going from 1 to 3 years. Something we said we probably want to keep the same is the select board, the number of select board members and their terms. So those are the kinds of initial decisions that we made. And I use the word decisions because they're preliminary decisions, because as we go through the process, we will probably have an occasion where we're going to have to go back and where we're going to talk about something that then would mean that we need to go back and revisit something that we thought we already did a preliminary decision on, which we can do. This is an iterative process, in other words. So we will be moving forward. If we affect something that we'd already decided in the past, we're going to have to go back and review that, make sure that everybody's comfortable with it, and then we move on. So, so the decisions that we're making now are preliminary decisions. We will have opportunities, either because we get feedback through the resident survey or the input sessions, or otherwise from public comment, where we may want to go back and have some discussions. So anything that we are recommending to be in the draft charter is just that, it's a draft, and it can be revised if necessary as we go forward. So I just want to make sure everybody understands it. So just because we vote on something, which we will be doing as we move forward, doesn't mean it's the last time we can visit this, or if we learn something new, we may want to come back and change what it was we originally proposed. Did I say anything that anybody didn't already know or is in conflict with what your understanding is about our process?
Oh, I have a question, Betsy. So, yeah. And maybe it's because I missed the first few months, but are we also adding things that aren't in the special acts and bylaws that might, that we
Potentially.
want?
Yes,
Yeah?
yeah.
Okay.
We potentially could do that too. Or we could say, we're not going to put something in charter because in the charter, it requires, in order to change something, it's
Yes.
more of a process.
Yeah.
Maybe we want to keep something in the bylaws, but we'd like to make a recommendation that
Okay.
maybe somebody review that bylaw. So we'd come out with recommendations at the other end of this of maybe some bylaw changes that we might want to recommend.
Okay.
Thanks for asking that. Okay, so we all, yeah, Nikki? You're on mute. Okay.
I just wanted to add, and please, I want somebody to correct me if I'm incorrect about this, because this is sort of my understanding based on our meetings to date. And I think that other people have a different understanding. So I just want to make sure that I am clear and everybody else is clear. It feels like the beginning of the conversation about each of the topics that we talk about is a broad overarching framework. And then later discussions go into more depth about whatever. So for example, right now we're talking about the town administrator. It feels like the beginning of that conversation is more broad framework, just lay out the basic kind of wireframe. And then further conversations come down about the very specific details of what does this responsibility entail, how is it enacted, et cetera. It feels like a lot of the time we're getting bogged down in the details before we've gotten to the details, if that makes sense. But I don't know if that's just me misunderstanding the framework. So I would love some clarification about that.
Yeah, and I think we can let maybe Pat or Anthony speak to that. But my understanding is that on some of these, like when we got to the legislative stuff, some of that is more straightforward. And it seems like, so we start off with kind of the high view. We take a look at what it is. We're taking a look at what other towns are doing, kind of taking a look at the comparator stuff, and then having a discussion about it. And people are kind of expressing their thoughts. And then, you know, in a perfect world, then we might be ready to make some preliminary decisions. I think as the topics get more complex, that last stage of getting to the point of making some preliminary decisions gets to be a little bit tougher, just given the fact that there are so many different feelings about a topic, et cetera. But Anthony, you want to speak to it?
I think you both really laid out the process pretty well. So yes, we're starting with sort of the baseline language that comes, the baseline which comes from your bylaws and from your special acts, which we then talk about the issues. And one of the things we're getting from the conversation amongst the committee is just an idea, a feel for the direction you want to go in. Then we go back in and make changes and bring that back to the committee, where you get to the point where you do what Betsy said, which is to make that preliminary decision where we can then move on through the charter and build on that. So I think both of you really laid it out pretty well.
Right. Yeah. So I think, Nikki, to a certain extent, we are actually in the detail throughout the process. To answer your question, it's not quite as high level strategic and then go down to the detail. It could be that we actually, depending on what we're talking about, may have to get more detailed on the front end than not, which is part of the challenge to manage our way through this.
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else before we jump in? Okay, subcommittee update. The survey, the town survey subcommittee met, and we had a presentation done by the Collins Center Survey Group. And then we took a vote and decided that we wanted to move forward with the Collins Center for that project. And so the contracting of that is firmly in Patrick's hands. But we're moving forward. We're have now scheduled our first kickoff meeting to really start talking about the detail of the survey on March 3rd at 5 p.m. Anybody's welcome to join us if you'd like to. So that's one thing. Sorry, I got one administrative thing. We have done a lot of outreach to fill our open spot. And so there've been a lot of conversations in the community with people, trying to, reach out to different groups in the community that than normally are participating in this. And so we can add to kind of the diversity of our group. I think we may have a couple of candidates that might be interested in joining us. The process is that they send their interest with a copy of their resume that'll go to the select board. The select board has to vote. And then once that vote happens, then that individual can join the committee. So we still, it's not over till it's over. So if anybody has anyone that you would like to propose, I would ask you to please send me, talk to them, see if they're interested. If they're interested, then let me know and I can follow up with them. Okay. The Communications Committee.
I can give a short update. So we had talked long ago, it feels like, the 6th of January about the postcard, that informational postcard that we want to send out. I spoke a little bit with Laura. She updated the language. And however, I spoke with Patrick as well about funding for this. And he was mentioning that it is close in chronologically to the time when we would be sending a postcard out about the survey, which I know that the survey postcard is included in the quote for the survey expenses. So I wanted to bring that back, I guess, to the group. We haven't had a chance to talk about it in subcommittee, and maybe you choose for us to do that first and then come back and talk to the group about it. But it didn't sound like, based on the communication I got from Patrick, that there was budget for sending a separate postcard anyway.
Okay. I think probably, in the interest of keeping all of this moving, it probably would be a good idea for the communications group to kind of put their heads together. And if you want, we can fill you in on maybe after our next meeting, we'll have a better idea of timing for some of this stuff. When we talk to Stephanie, who's our contact at the Collins Center for the survey. And we can get a sense of that. I think Patrick's probably right. I think the timing is going to be the way things have evolved. We may be very close in time, but there may be some other things that we want to pick up and do. So, I think we need to coordinate.
Yeah, we have a meeting scheduled next week, and we will discuss that. We'll also be talking with Laura, the communications officer for the town, about a communication strategy, and a lot first, like social media and Facebook.
Yeah.
But, I just remain concerned that people are going to get the survey and they will be more likely to engage in it if they know what the heck it's about, and whether that's with a mailer or some other method of reaching people. We'll talk more about that on Thursday.
Yeah, I share your concern, and I think we need to figure out how we promote ourselves to people who aren't ordinarily, logging on to burlington.gov. So I think that is a challenge. So when you have that committee, and I'm trying to keep Jess up to speed on kind of where things are going with us, but if you need me to do anything or participate, just let me know.
Sounds good. And we do have, just in case, just so people know, we didn't get a chance to distribute it at the Civic Expo, but we do have a flyer version of that postcard. So that could be one application of getting out the same information in a way that is maybe not as costly as sending out a postcard to every home.
After your meeting, if it makes sense, maybe you could send that flyer out to everybody so we could all take a look at it.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
That'd be great. Okay. Anything else on the communications? All right.
Hadn't we decided who's going to do the survey?
Yes, that's what we just said. Yeah, we hired the Collins Center survey.
Okay, I didn't know that. Okay, now I know.
Okay, sorry, I thought I had mentioned that. Okay, so we're going to hand the meeting over to the Collins Center, Pat and Anthony. Everybody should have the charter draft of February 18th. Everybody should have the memo that Anthony sent, our discussion guide, if you will, from February 20th. Those are the documents that we'll be referring to. and if I'm right, and I'll hand it over to Anthony and Pat.
We're going to first start without the memo, just Pat talking big picture about the structure of the draft charter. Pat, you can go ahead.
Great. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Great. So you should have the most recent version of the preliminary draft charter dated 2/18. As the chair said, this is incorporating a lot of the language that Burlington already has in its bylaws and special acts to start with. We're going to start fleshing out these sections as we talk. And we've also incorporated some feedback that we got from the committee. And as we go along, we'll continue to make changes. So we've correcting typos and fixing numbering. What we use as our North Star is really the legislative guide that the state has to make sure that if you notice punctuation that's unusual or things are lowercase, we're really using a style guide that the state legislature has given us for items that are going to be turned into special acts. We've added a few extra things like a table of contents that might not go in with the special act because it's not traditionally part of the special act, the table of contents. But we've also added some comments on the side, so which we'll continue to add to. We should have given you a PDF version that shows the comments on the side, so you can see what has been changed as we go along. We'll continue to do that. So hopefully that you can follow along. One thing I did want to mention, we're trying to make this charter look a little bit more like some of the other comparable charters that you've been looking at. And one of the things that we would like to do is just move the order of articles. And I wanted to let you know that because we don't want you to be confused. Right now, the first article is a general article with some introduction. Second article, representative town meeting, which is really your legislative branch. Right now, it says Article 3 is town manager, and Article 4 is elected officers. In future drafts, we're going to switch those. Because really the executive branch should be coming before the town manager. It's just originally the way we pulled it out, and the order we're talking about it in isn't necessarily the order it's going to appear in the final charter. But we're talking about town manager or town administrator first, because that's really one of the central questions that you have that will really help us build out the rest of the charter. So in future charters, you may see Article 4 and 3 swapped. And so I just wanted to let you know that now so that you don't get confused as we go along. That means things will have different numbers. And that's all I have. And we'd love, continue to send feedback if you notice that we numbered something wrong, or we really appreciate that kind of feedback. So, and we enjoy hearing from you. I know we've had some other feedback about suggested language. And if you focus those all through the chair, then they'll come to us in an organized fashion so we can deal with each of them.
Right. Yeah. Thank you. Great. Thank you, Pat. And then in terms of the changing the order, it won't affect anything in terms of our discussions, but it may just look a little strange the first time the order flips a little bit, which will be the next version that you see. Okay. Oh, and just a comment that the order that Pat's talking about, I know Jack had referenced the Winchester Charter, but that's exactly what the Winchester has done, is that they have exactly what Pat has suggested in their charter in terms of how the flow of how that is organized. So, okay. So, and you guys, you have the ability to share your screen, so any documents you want to put up, feel free to do so.
Great. So I'm going to share the version of the memo, sort of in 1 second. The first thing to start with is that as sort of clarifications as we sort of go through the memo is we're going through parts of the town administrator section 3, article 3. We didn't have the whole thing. We're trying to keep it in pieces, sort of things that we think the committee can get through in a certain time period. Just because you don't see certain things on the memo doesn't mean that we won't or can't go back or go through things as the sort of committee raises those questions or wants to touch on things. And we are seeing those emails, people wanting to talk about certain things. Now, the first thing in the memo is the first part of Article 3, which is 3-1, and I will share my screen.
Thank you.
I cannot share.
Pat, can you? You should be able to. Or Meg, can you make him share? I thought he had permission.
Oh, now I can. Let's
Okay.
see.
Thank you.
Share content.
Wonderful WebEx, huh?
Yeah, it's
Stinks.
Pat, can you try to share? It's not letting me sort of go through the motion.
I can't share. It says you have to be a co-host, so somebody might. Oh,
Meg. Meg, you're on mute.
It should be all set. I made both of you presenters.
great.
Well, now it's telling me I can't share.
I think they have to be co-hosts.
Okay.
Is there any reason why we can't do Zoom?
That's a really good question. I will ask Patrick. Meg, can you make them co-hosts? Jess, you can't either, right? You're not set up as.
No, I'm not set up.
Me either.
I don't think
Okay.
I'm set up to do that.
Yeah, Patrick said he had set it up so you could do that. That's the problem. Because I definitely don't either. Okay. Does everybody have the memo in front of them? This is kind of called Technology 101 and the confusion or maybe Meg, I can send you this document.
I'm gonna try to, Meg, real quick, I'm gonna try to reclaim host role and see if I can do anything. So hold on, give me, oh shoot, I need a key. Never mind, can't do it. All right.
So everybody has a copy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Should we just go from the copy that everyone has?
I think we're going to have to do that because until we.
Anthony and Patricia, you are both now marked as.
Try now. I think it should be working.
Okay. Can you guys see my screen?
Yeah. Yep. Good.
Okay, great. All right. So the first part of the memo that we're going to discuss is 3-1. This is the appointment of the town administrator. So this is the start of Article 3. So your current language is at the top. Again, we haven't changed a lot of things here about the vote threshold for the appointment. The major changes that we're suggesting that the committee can bounce around or not bounce around is to reference more specifically that the conditions of employment will be determined by the contract, which has been the current practice of Burlington and really many other communities that have a town administrator or manager. So those are the major changes. Some of the things that you can that we think we can modify. You could include the language around that the town administrator will continue to have an indefinite term. So that is what's in your current language. We left that out because the term will be determined by the written contract for the term of office, compensation, and other conditions of employment, and that the contract itself will be subject to the provisions of the charter. So, we're open to answer questions. That's really the gist of the change suggested here in 3-1.
This came up as a result of a comment I know, Jack, you made, I made as well, where it said the town administrator was exempt from the personnel policies of the town. And we both had a reaction to that, saying, why would they be? And the answer was because it's covered under a contract, but it doesn't say that. So it just looks weird. So to get more explicit is kind of what we can do here.
And one of the things I would just point out here again on that point was the contract will be subject to the charter, and so this is the thing that it may or may not cause discussion amongst the committee. Will prevail over conflicting provisions of the human resources bylaw, rule, or regulation. Just so you know, we did look at the Burlington does have a human resources regulation. I don't think it's specifically a bylaw, and it does state that contract employees have a little bit more flexibility to the extent that is needed, because they are, they're not covered by collective bargaining. They're covered by whatever their individual contract is with Burlington.
Mm-hmm.
So he will not be an employee of the town. He'll be an independent contractor.
He'll be a contracted employee.
But they're an employee of the town. They're not. They're an employee of the town that has an employment contract. They're not a contract employee.
Yeah, I just want to be sure we don't get IRS problems with a subcontracted deal.
Yeah, right. So, which is very important, the differentiation, Anthony. So we need to be careful about how that's worded. But basically, this is saying they are ruled by the contract. The only question I have is that any conflicting provision and should prevail over the conflicting provision in the human resources bylaw, blah, 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 unless it's a required by law. I mean, there are some laws when it comes to those things that it doesn't matter if you have a contract or not. The government, the league law will supersede any contract so I don't know if we need language to that effect in there.
I mean, we could add a clause here that says, so it says that the contract will be subject to the provisions of the charter. We could have, state law. Now, the only reason I would sort of, again, you're the committee. You guys can decide what you want to do. You do have a human resources personnel regulation right now, and it covers any number of situations, particularly around your collective bargaining and a variety of things. So there may be things that are negotiated with a incoming town administrator to woo them or to bring them into town that may be different from what's in your bylaw. So this just allows some flexibility. So if the bylaw, for example, has, well, I don't want to use it. I use an example, but if the bylaw has something around, some provision, unless it's specifically overruled by the contract, the bylaw will prevail. But if it conflicts with something in the contract, then the contract will prevail. So without sort of belaboring, we could add language that says subject to the provisions of the charter and state law. If you want to remove this, prevail over any contract, any conflicting provisions of the human resources bylaw, rule, or regulation, you can, but that may constrain the town's ability to enter into a contract with a future town administrator.
Is there any reason you can't just add at the end of there, the town administrator shall be a contracted employee of the town?
You don't want to say contracted employee, Jack,
You don't
to your
want
point
to?
before. No, I think I don't believe so. The town administrator is an employee of the town who has an employment contract.
Correct.
Where I'm pushing is you want to get the word employee in there to distinguish from an independent contractor, which is a whole different category by the IRS.
Right.
Does it say employment contract? Can we just say written employment contract?
That would be great.
Doesn't it
I mean,
already
we could
say
just
the
start.
terms of the employment? Therefore, it implies that the person is being employed. Sentence 2.
So appoint a town administrator to a term and fix the compensation within position of town shall not be subject to the law.
I don't think so because you can still be employed as an independent contractor.
Right, right. So I think employment contract might work.
An employee contract.
Let me interject for a moment. Why? It seems like we're trying very hard to use particular legal language with the phrase contract or employer or employment. Is that used on every single other mentioned role within the town government in some other way? Or are we overthinking this particular element?
This is one of the few positions in town, as I understand it, that actually has an employment contract.
Got it.
So I think to say that you can say the employment contract shall be subject to the provisions of the charter, shall prevail over any other conflicting provision of any human resources bylaw, rule, or regulation, unless this is where unless it then
Unless otherwise required by law.
A law, yeah, yes, unless otherwise required by law. I think that would.
Barbara just shot a question in there. How does the superintendent of schools do it? He's got a contract. How does he do it?
Usually the school superintendent, police, fire chiefs, they're also usually hired by a contract, or the conditions of their employment.
So again, and so maybe there is another contract employee, but I'm talking about the town proper as opposed to the schools. But it would work the same way if you have anybody who's, if we had other people who were under contract. Having a contract does not allow you to violate federal or state law when it comes to employment stuff. So that's what Nikki's wording will get us through that. So I like that. But so it.
I'm sorry, did I see, was there some other wording? You said there was some other wording placed in the chat?
No, it's just a question about the superintendent. That's what you said.
What I have for the, I'm sorry, what I have for the updated wording is the employment contract shall be subject to the provisions of the charter and shall prevail over any conflicting provisions of any human resources bylaw, rule, or regulation unless otherwise required by law. Is that?
Yeah, I think that's what we're saying. What is, Nikki, is that?
Yeah, those are the changes that I made. I mean, I am no legal or constitutional scholar, so I think, somebody should vet that language, but.
Yeah, it'll get vetted certainly
absolutely,
by town council.
Yeah.
Anybody
Any more
else have
discussion on 3-1?
Well, I want to vote on it. So let's wait a minute, Anthony. So is there any other discussion before we vote on whether using that as the language that Pat articulated, whether that, any other comments on that before we take a vote on that? Okay, so we're talking about the language on 3-1. So, all right. So, everybody clear on what we're voting on? That's okay. Pat, can you repeat that?
Actually, can I request that Pat paste it into the chat? That way we can see it.
Sure. And for those of you who want to know where to find it, who don't use WebEx all the time,
yeah, the button is on the bottom right of the screen. It says chat. And if you open that, it opens a panel and you should be able to chat in there if you want or read it.
It looks like the cartoon balloon.
okay. Does everybody see it? The employment contract shall be subject to the provisions of the charter and shall prevail over any conflicting provision of any human resources bylaw, rule, or regulation unless otherwise required by law. So that's the
And
language.
just for
Yeah.
clarity, is that to replace the last sentence, Pat? Is that how you?
Yes, so that would be the language for discussion with replacing the last sentence. So I can read the full paragraph if you would like.
Sure.
The Select Board of the Town of Burlington, by an affirmative vote of at least 4 members, shall appoint a town administrator. The terms of the employment shall be the subject of a written contract, which will determine the term of office, compensation, and other conditions of employment. The employment contract shall be subject to the provisions of the charter and shall prevail over any conflicting provision of any human resources bylaw, rule, or regulation, unless otherwise required by law.
Okay. Is everybody clear?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to go around. Bill's not here. Matt,
Yes.
Corey,
Yes.
Nikki,
Yes.
Jack.
I'm going to abstain. I'm not clear on it.
We'll come back to why you're not clear. Steve,
Yes.
Russ,
Yes.
Eileen,
Yes.
Jess.
Yes.
Okay, Betsy, yes. Okay. All right, so that we can move on. We've got that, and then obviously this will all get reviewed by a lawyer. So if we need to have any legal tweaking, that will happen at some point in the future. All right, Anthony. Next, where do you want to go?
So we're scrolling down to 3-3, which is a discussion on the bond. So the recommendation here is
You're skipping
that this
3-2?
So yeah, we didn't have any changes or suggested changes on 3-2. Do you want to discuss 3-2, the qualifications?
Yeah.
Okay, so I will. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to just share my version of the charter so everybody can see the same document. So I'm just going to change what I'm sharing. So this is 3-2. These are the qualifications for the town administrator. These are pretty similar to what you already have in your well, these are what are from your bylaws with the tweaks of here that says town administrator's appointment, and this word here through. But aside from that, this is what's in your bylaws. So we didn't have any suggested changes. If you guys want to modify this, you can.
Thank you for making it bigger. Appreciate that. Okay, so there were you guys at the college just took exactly what we have here and didn't make any changes. Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
Well, I see.
Except that we took out the gendered language, and there was a comment that the last sentence was confusing, and so we put through bylaw, I believe.
Yes, these areas that are bold and underlined, those were not substantive changes. They were, changes for clarity based on conversations that we've had.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Jack, do you have something here that you feel we need to talk about?
If you look at the end, the through bylaw, that means town meeting is going to put some language in there. And are the select board then bound by the language that town meeting puts into a bylaw when they're negotiating a contract with the potential town manager? Is it going to be some written guidance that the select board follow, or do they just negotiate whatever they want without any language?
Well, the way this is currently structured, it states that you've got the qualifications that are existing in the beginning of the paragraph, but then this does permit the town, through a vote of the town meeting, through a bylaw, to establish additional qualifications, and the town manager would be, or going forward, the town manager would be bound by those.
The town manager or the selectmen would be bound by it when they're negotiating with the town to hire a town manager.
Is it about
Yes, the
negotiations
select
or
board
is
will
it
be
about
bound
the
to.
qualifications for a potential candidate?
These
I
are
think
setting
those
the
are
qualifications for a potential candidate. Correct.
So the way this is worded now, make sure I understand it. It says the town can establish bylaws that will make certain requirements for this position. To
It
have
may
additional
add to the
qualifications.
requirements. Yeah.
Right, add to what are the qualifications through bylaw is what it's saying, right? And
Correct.
that's what we have now. Is that true?
Correct. That's what you have in
So
your bylaw, in your current bylaw.
So they would, what are the conditions that the town meeting would add to? That shall be a person of proven professional ability, especially fitted by education, and that's kind of vague.
So, one example, these are intended to be necessarily broad qualifications and not specific qualifications. For example, a certain degree requirement, etc. One item that sometimes comes up, and we don't recommend this, but sometimes there might be residency requirements or living within a certain distance of the town. We're not necessarily recommending that. That's kind of fallen into disfavor over the years, but there may be some more specific additional requirements. Or you could choose to remove that last sentence and just allow the select board to determine the requirements of the position along with, for example, the job description, which usually would include years of experience, degrees, etc.
So,
but I know there are raised hands.
Is this
That
would it be
last
correct
sentence
to
kind of
say?
ties, that last sentence potentially ties the hands of the select board.
Yeah, it does allow the town meeting to add through bylaw additional requirements. I mean that's one characterization. Yes.
I think this was in the kind of checks and balances category when we were discussing it initially. And we have it today. So the question is this something we want to keep? I think that's the nature of this. Do we want to keep the ability of the town meeting to add additional requirements in order for the town administrator? Russell?
Yep. It takes a second to hit the button. So first, I wanted to echo that line. Does effectively is currently in place, and I think the intention is that the town, as in the town meeting, has the ability to establish whatever qualifications they feel is important or appropriate or necessary. That I agree, the select board would then be obliged to follow when trying to find a candidate to fill that role. That feels to me at least like a thing that makes sense. It's broad enough. I'm not sure, Jack, what you're driving at for like more detailed than the things that are already stated. But I think it does make sense to allow the town the ability to say, we want X, whatever that is, and that becomes a requirement that we would have to fulfill, or the select board would have to fulfill.
Yeah.
To
and
me,
Nikki,
the intent
okay.
of the opening sentences is the guidance for the select board, which gives them a lot of latitude. And then when you throw the last sentence in there, that potentially takes that latitude away from the select board.
But if it exists now, does that
I don't think
exists?
I don't think it exists now.
It does exist. I quoted it in the chat, and it says the last sentence of, I don't know how to get to the whole number, but it's in the current bylaws that are posted on the website. The town may, from time to time, by bylaw, establish such additional qualifications it deems necessary and appropriate.
But we've never done that.
But it's still in the bylaws.
It's still there. Right?
Nikki, you've got a comment. Let's go to Nikki's comment.
Yeah, I was just, I think somebody gave a good example of like establishing residency requirements. I think it was Pat. So that was one question, is like, what might this be used for? What other requirement might the select board be asking for? So that's part one of my question, which is partially answered. Part two is, do other towns have this kind of provision, and what have they done with that provision, if anything? And then point three, which is not really a question, is just that, you know, the select board is the town meeting is the legislative authority, and there's lots and lots of people on there that we trust to make our laws and represent us. And that's just really a point. It's not just like one person or a small body making a bylaw decision. It would be the entire town meeting. I'm not sure that I feel like this sentence is necessary in any way, but that's just one other point. So
Okay.
One more thought just to rejoin on that. I do happen to have the Winchester section that Jack had referenced Winchester in an email prior. I happen to have it printed. They do happen to have a sentence in there that says the town may from time to time by bylaw establish such additional qualifications as seem necessary and appropriate. So at least one comparator does use that similar language.
Yeah. Pat, do you have any, is that kind of a standard thing? Do you know? If you don't know, that's fine.
No, I think it is. It's sometimes in the charter language. It's fairly standard. However, it really depends on the community, and I would say, given the job market, you know, communities have been trending towards giving a maximum amount of flexibility in attracting candidates. So opening things up to more candidates with more types of experience might be is the trend. However, if you're talking about the town of Burlington, which has not added any additional requirements, you can make your own determination of whether the town meeting would be judicious in adding extra requirements, or whether you want to have the balance or have the select board be in control of all the qualifications.
Any other comments on this?
I agree with Nikki in that, you know, we elect town meeting and we got to believe that they're going to act in the best interest of the town.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Steve, any comment from you?
I don't think this is very controversial.
Okay. Okay. Corey?
Very well said, Steve. I agree.
Okay, so why don't let's take a preliminary vote about the language as you see it. And that's 3-2. And if you're in favor of the language as you see it, please say yes. Okay. Matt? Corey?
Yes.
Nikki?
yes.
Jack?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Okay. Russell?
Yes.
Eileen?
Yes.
Jess?
Yep.
Okay, Betsy, yes. Okay, let's go on to 3-3.
Okay. So can you see my screen now? I've changed the view. Okay.
Yep.
So 3 is again, this is imported from your bylaws. So you currently have a bylaw talking about the town administrator executing a bond on behalf of the town, you know, in their work as the town administrator. We'd recommend that you keep this, that you keep the language in the bylaw and not import it to the charter. That way the town can keep it or change it at a town meeting by a change of the bylaws. We've also talked to the town administrator, who's indicated that the bond has not been a requirement for several years for a town administrator.
What do towns do on this? What is the competitive picture here?
So none of your comparator towns have a bond in their charter.
Do they have a requirement that there's a bond for the town administrator or town manager? Whether it's in the charter or not?
I don't believe, no, I haven't seen any. Pat, double check me. I have not seen any bylaws, and definitely not any charters for the comparator towns.
I have not seen it in the charters or the bylaws for comparative towns. I think that what it has evolved into is that oftentimes a treasurer may be required to issue a bond. Currently, the duties that maybe a while back were held by a town administrator are in the treasurer's possession. In some towns, treasurers are required to hold a bond. But I don't see much for town manager or town administrator. That doesn't mean it's not out there, but it's definitely we definitely would not require it in a charter, especially where the town of Burlington itself has not been requiring it.
Okay. Any questions from anybody?
I am just confused what this even means. I don't know if I am missing something. Every time I see this language, I am confused about what it actually is intending to do. Could one of you, Anthony or Pat, explain what this line is in the first place?
So generally, these types of provisions are for the protection of the town. For example, the person in the role does something that creates some sort of liability. The bond the town could then tap on the bond to recoup the costs of perhaps litigation or things of that nature. We haven't seen them from any town administrators. And the other thing I just want to be clear about is if you don't put in the charter, we're not saying delete it. We're not saying delete from the bylaws. You could still have it as a bylaw. It's not used in other charters. It's not pretty common from what we see from other communities, larger or smaller than Burlington.
Yeah, I guess I would like to, Anthony, just to comment on that. Now that we're talking about a bond, whether it's in the charter or a bylaw, I think, we probably want to have a position on whether it's necessary. I think, Pat's comment about the fact that the treasurer, the treasurer is the one who has the control over the money, and maybe that's where the risk is. Whereas maybe the town administrator used to do that financial stuff. If other towns don't bond the administrator, but they do bond like the treasurer, that would be a fact that I think is, important for us to know. I don't want to just say, oh, it's not going to go in here, but we're just going to not think about it any further and just kind of ignore it.
But this language elsewhere that says the town administrator basically approves everything the treasurer does. Elsewhere in this document. To me, a bond is somebody stealing money. For liability reasons, you get insurance.
Right. That's what a bond is. And that's, Nikki, that's the answer to your question. That's what it is.
All right.
And the question is, do we need an insurance policy in case, is there a risk that somebody in this position could steal money? That, right? I mean, that's kind of the point there, right?
That is so helpful. Thank you for that.
I think there is.
Wasn't understanding.
I think there is a risk.
Another question is why hasn't it been done if that's what our bylaws say to do?
Mm-hmm. Good question.
It may be that you
in the special act.
I'm sorry.
Is it, Pat, is it a special act or a bylaw for this one now, currently, that we have?
Anthony pulled the language over from the bylaw. I don't know if it's in the special act. I'm not aware of it being in the special act. I will take a peek though. I was just going to say that you can make a decision, for example, if you decide not to put it in the charter, and really you all as a committee may not have the information necessary to decide, who should have a bond, what should we do? That could be something that you recommend be reviewed by, the town, who's required to have a bond should this bylaw still be in existence. Without deciding what to do with the bylaw, you could make a choice to, recommend review of this.
That would be
I
my
like that idea.
Yeah,
Leave
me
it,
too.
leave it in
Same.
bylaw language, and then make a note that this should be examined.
I agree.
Okay, why don't we, I think we should have a consensus on this. Let's vote on removing 3.3 bond from here with a recommendation that that there should be a thorough review of who should be bonded, which roles in Burlington town government should be bonded.
Yeah.
I think I said that right.
Yes.
Okay.
So moved.
Okay. So let's vote. Matt, Corey.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Nikki,
Yes.
Jack,
Yes.
Steve,
No.
no. Russ,
Yes.
Eileen,
Yes.
Jess,
Yes.
and Betsy is boy, this is a hard one for me. I'm going to say yes, but I'm hugely conflicted on it. But I'll go yes for now. Okay, so that's a decision, and Meg, we need to start keeping a track of everything that we need to come back, and Pat, you as well, kind of that we're going to be coming back to that. Okay, next would be 3.4.
I'm actually gonna sort of get out of the memo for one moment, because there were some questions that we got via email. So I'm gonna hop over to the charter. So the memo goes straight to 3-4C, but I know there were some questions around A, which the committee voted on at the last meeting.
Okay, so the shall survive the responsible efficient administration function they control may be authorized to talk about it.
Before we get into that,
The-
Steve has his hand raised. I don't know if.
Sorry.
The only thing I would say is in the first sentence, we said the town administrator, and thereafter we just say the administrator.
Okay, I think Steve had a comment.
So we
I'd like
might
to
just say
comment
at the end,
ahead
here and
first.
after administrator, or we might just say town administrator.
That was from the last section. Sorry.
Okay, that's okay, Steve. I want to capture what you have to say. So let's do that before we move on. I'm sorry, I didn't see your hand. You're on the far side of my screen. Go ahead.
That's fine. No, it is in the special act. I looked for the bond, and it says the town administrator shall. So it's interesting to me that it's simply not being done.
So it's a
That's all.
special act, not a bylaw.
Correct.
So it is now, this is the, okay. I don't know if that changes anything for anybody.
Doesn't the special act convey more legal weight than a bylaw, or does it sort of not matter in this case?
The special
Well,
act, yes, the act is a state law passed by the legislature. A special act charter that this committee is working on would have the same. It would basically trump the older special act. So you could make the modification if you want to keep the bond
but
in this special act. Yeah.
Yeah, but it would, to
But
your point, Russell,
right.
it's more muscular than the bylaw.
All
I
right,
think
but
that's what you're asking.
yeah, I guess I'll at least state that I don't think it would affect my vote. I think I would still vote to move the bond language to a bylaw, but it is interesting to note that it is currently in the stronger language.
I just want to, I know we voted and we're supposed to keep moving on after we vote. But is there, Eileen, the question was asked before about whether there's liability in this role, whether there's a financial, whether they can, where there's a risk. Is there a risk to the town? Again, what's in the best interest of Burlington here? is there a risk to the town? Do we need insurance to protect the town? Because is there a risk that somebody in this position, and I'm not saying anything about anybody, but is there a risk that somebody in this position could?
Just be aware there's a law, Mass Tort Claims Law, which limits the liability of a municipality if they're sued. I forget what the cap is. I think it's $50,000, $100,000.
Yeah.
Oh,
But this
really?
is and this is a bond though of like if somebody runs away with embezzles $100,000, so that would be different, right?
A bond would be different than liability, absolutely.
Okay, so a bond would not be subject to a limit like that. If somebody in a position embezzled $250,000, the insurance policy for the bond would be reimbursing the town for $250,000. But there was an insurance premium, so there's a cost involved. So it's, my guess is that's probably why we haven't had one for a long time.
And that's why I think, to our discussion earlier, this is not something that we have the information to decide on within this committee. I mean, deciding on insurance for the town, I think, is a little outside our purview of this committee, but it would be something that I think, as we had discussed, I would recommend that at least there is a recommendation that all that information be explored.
Okay.
I would also throw out, this still feels like a thing that the town would want to have more flexibility in how it goes about, deciding bond, no bond, minimum amounts, things like that, where it feels appropriate that the town meeting would be able to pass a bylaw defining that, as opposed to a charter where any change would then have to require it going back to the state.
Well, I think you can get around that, Russ, by not saying how much and all that kind of stuff. But I think we voted on it to recommend that it should go into an analysis. But I think we need to do so saying it's Jess, to your point, this is important. And somebody should be looking at this. And it's probably not just the town administrator. There are probably other roles as well that should be bonded.
Yes.
And so I think we need to make note of that with a kind of strong underline that this is an action that really needs to happen in the best interest of our town.
Steve, I have a question. So do you have a date on that special acts?
1978.
Yeah, okay. It'd be interesting to find out what the impetus was.
Or why it's not happened too.
Well, that's, I'm sure there's a lot of that.
Yeah.
The impetus was that we did have a treasurer who embezzled.
Oh.
Say what? What?
Jack, you want to repeat that?
The impetus may have been going back many years. There was a treasurer who criminally embezzled money.
Gotcha. All right. And of course, we had that situation at the Housing Authority, where I'm a board member.
Okay, so this even underlines even more strongly that, to Jess's point, we're not the people, we're not the experts in this thing. And so for now, we're going to remove it from the charter draft, but with a very strong recommendation that somebody take a look at this. And as a matter of fact, probably needs to be looking at it before we finish this project. So I think we need to have to figure out how that happens. Maybe I'll talk to Patrick about that.
Yeah, I would say assign it to Patrick to follow through.
Okay. Why doesn't the minutes reflect that I will talk to Patrick about follow through on this item? Okay. So now we're at 3.4. So this is where the language was substituted.
Yeah. We were looking at 3.4, and I believe Jack was going to comment on some language.
Well,
I was just
3.4a.
noting that in the first sentence, it refers to the town administrator. Thereafter, it just says in all places, the administrator.
So should we be consistent?
Well,
the
you can either
titling?
put with the town administrator, or you can just write at the end of the first sentence, hereinafter, administrator. You know, either way.
I think current practice would be to say town administrator throughout. I noticed in some places in the special act they say the administration. I think it would be a good idea. I know we just pulled over the bylaw language, but it would be a good idea to just use town administrator throughout. I'll make a note of that and make sure we make that change.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments about A in terms of this responsible for the efficient administration of all functions under their control, as may be authorized by charter, bylaw, by other town meeting vote, or by the select board, including all officers appointed by them and their respective departments. I think the only thing here, and it kind of depends on where we go on appointments for elected boards, and whether we need to have wording in here that exempts out elected boards, or just, I'm not sure whether that would be swept in under that or not. So I don't know whether we leave it and then come back afterwards, or what, or whether this is general enough that it doesn't.
It depends upon how you want to read that. If you read it one way, it's just referring to who the select board or the town administrator appoints. It can be read either way, depending on what interpretation you want.
Including all officers appointed by them, is them referring to the select board, or is them referring to the town administrator? And that last.
This is talking about the town administrator. These are the town administrator's duties.
Correct.
So where it says them in the last sentence, it's saying by town administrator.
It also uses the term there further up, so I think it's implied that it's the town administrator.
Okay, I think that's where, if I think where the rub is maybe potentially is if there are officers like department heads, would that be considered an officer?
Betsy, the place to possibly deal with your concern might be Article 4, when we deal with the elected offices and boards.
Okay. Okay. I just want to make sure we're all in the same place on that. All right.
So just for our clarification, so you want to change the administrator to the town administrator, and other than that, leave the paragraph as it is, or?
Yeah.
I was going to say we may also want to change them to the town administrator to make that more clear as well. Like we've done that in other places.
Okay. And then you're going to say town administrator rather than just administrator?
Right.
Okay. And I think rather than said administrator, you can say the town administrator. I mean, kind of make the language less legally easy.
Yeah, we can make that change throughout every paragraph. Yeah.
Okay, so then B, there is nothing. C.
So I'm sorry, Betsy. I don't mean to interrupt, but I thought Barbara had her hand up a second ago. I don't think she spoke.
Okay. Well, Barbara, sorry.
Can you hear me?
Okay. Yep.
Okay. I just wanted to, I don't know if anyone had a chance to read the email that I sent to Betsy earlier today. I just sort of want to reiterate my concern that I expressed there, that I think this is extremely vague and broad, and until the functions and responsibilities and authorities of the different elective boards are defined, this concerns me. So maybe it will all be resolved when you define those other things, but the way it stands right now, this is far too broad for my tastes. And I know I don't get a vote, but just wanted to express that. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for that. Okay.
But this isn't changing anything that exists today. Where it will change
I disagree.
is when we're defining the responsibilities within the deeper sections, because right now basically like what this is saying is officers appointed by them. Anthony, you're echoing really bad. Is officers appointed by them are the ones that they supervise and are responsible for.
In my opinion, there's a substantive change between the previous language and this language, because of the previous language, it says all matters that come under the jurisdiction of the select board, which is different than just all functions under their control. It's undefined. It's not necessarily wrong. It's just very unclear to me.
I think to Jack's earlier point, we are going to be coming at that through discussions down the line, if I'm right, Pat and Anthony. I think we should make a note to come back to this and see if after we deal with those, more specific boards and elected boards and committees, whether this wording still is appropriate for what we think it should be.
I think that's fair. I just wanted to raise the concern because until those things are defined, this is, it's alarming to me if there was no definition on those other elected boards and their responsibilities. I know that's coming, but because we can't look at that right now, this is alarmingly broad.
Well, I am going to invite you to stay tuned because we're going to get there, and let's see if we can't address some of those issues when we get there. And for the time being, let's kind of move on to the next.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Yeah, if you look at the Winchester one, they take the opportunity at this level to put in the exclusions that make it clear that the town administrator does not have the power over the staff of the independently elected boards. So we can do it now, or we can do it later, or we can do it both.
Mm-hmm. Anthony and Pat, what are your thoughts on that?
I think we're each waiting for the other to speak. I think that it does make sense to maybe to look at this later, because you're going to be looking at each individual board and you may make decisions with respect to each of them, rather than upfront making that decision at this point. That we can put a pin in this, and they'll all be subject to going back and taking a look at these later.
So I wonder if we can highlight this in yellow or something for the next version, with a note in the comments section, just saying that that the committee wants to come back and review this wording once the discussion has happened on the different boards and committees. Does that sound like it might work for folks?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm looking for nods because I don't want to. Okay, thanks. Okay, so let's do that. Let's move on to the next thing for now.
Okay. So I am going on to. Well, Betsy, did you discuss B? That we didn't recommend any changes, so I don't know if you wanted to discuss B.
if there's any, does anybody have anything in B? I think that's pretty straightforward. Let's go to C.
I think the last thing we added there, I think we should start including terms that aren't quite clear in the definition section as we go along, rather than waiting till the end to throw things in the definition. Because appointed staff, town staff members, I don't know what that is.
Mm-hmm. Duly appointed town staff members. What's a duly appointed town staff member? What does that mean?
I don't know.
Pat? Anthony?
I think the language, I don't have it up right now, but as we said, we brought that language along from the bylaw, but in general, it would refer to appointed staff as opposed to elected staff. And in the past, a lot of positions such as treasurer, et cetera, were elected position, clerk. So it would refer to staff that's appointed as opposed to being elected.
So it would belong in the definition section, so anyone reading it would know what it means. So we got to create a definition for it so we know what it means.
Either that
I think
or
that
you say it in English.
I was going to say, I was going to say the same thing about official. What do we say? Officers that you said a second ago, Betsy. Same idea. So is there a parking lot where we can just note terms that we want to have defined in a definitions section in the future, and not necessarily have to define them right now, but just have.
Sure. I think there's a definitions section that we have not.
Section 1.8 is definition sections, and we just leave it blank now.
Yeah. So maybe as we go through this, we can ask Pat to put things like duly appointed town staff members, just stick those words up there, just like the officers comment, Nikki, so that we can come back and define those things later. If that sounds like a process that would work from your perspective, Pat.
That would work, and we can also make a decision. I think in general, we favor when something is just included in one specific section. Sometimes you can word the section to make it more clear without requiring a definition. So I think what would be really helpful when we highlight words like that, I can keep track of them, and then we can either put them in definitions or we can change the language either on the spot or later to be more plain English.
Okay, and maybe if you could just keep, maybe the place to track it is in under the definition so we can all see it each time.
And make those decisions.
That's awesome. Great. Okay, any other comments about this? And basically what this is saying is that anybody hired by the town for any board, committee, or commission must be resident and registered voter. Is appointed by the town. They're not. Must be a registered voter of the town, exception of duly appointed town staff members. So if you're an employee, you don't have to be a resident of the town, but if you are on a committee, you are, is basically what that's saying, right?
I think so.
Boy, it sure would be nice to say it, what it actually says, and without all of that words.
Right.
Maybe we could just simplify the language there.
So we had made a recommendation for that last sentence about the residents and registered voter. We may want to move that to the section dealing with appointed, when we talk about administration of appointed boards, because this section really talks about staff more than appointed boards. So we may, one of our suggestions is to take that sentence out of there and put it in with the appointment language. where we talk about, the select board has appointment authority, and then put that with that in the select board's appointment authority. But so that's one way of handling it, because it doesn't quite, even though the language is in this bylaw, it doesn't quite make sense in the context of what this paragraph is all about.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
So, yeah. So this paragraph is just about the appointment of staff. And, the committee can make this decision. But right now, the appointing authority for unelected boards, right, boards and committees, there's some in the town meeting, and then the select board has the ability to appoint. And so we haven't given that any of that authority to the town administrator. If you want to do that, you can, but it wouldn't necessarily fit here in the section talking about the appointment of employees, town staff.
Okay, I just want to cut to what this is actually saying. All this is saying is who needs to be a resident and registered voter, right? I mean, this is that's all it's getting at.
Well, that's
between.
If I may, let me back up. So the current language from the bylaw states, said administrator shall appoint and remove, subject to Chapter 31 of the general laws, all department heads, all officers, and employees who come under the jurisdiction of the select board, except the town accountant, treasurer, collector, and town council. Any person appointed by the administration to any statutory board, committee, or commission must be a resident and a registered voter of the town of Burlington, with the exception of duly appointed town staff members. So the current language from the bylaw merges your town staff with appointments to boards and committees. The proposed language, the town administrator shall appoint and remove, subject to Chapter 31 of the general laws, all department heads, all officers, and employees for whom no other method of appointment is provided in this charter except the town accountant, treasurer, collector, town council, and employees of the school department. The town administrator may not appoint or remove persons serving under elected boards or committees unless the affected board or committee has approved the action by majority vote. So the language for discussion focuses purely on employees, and the question around the appointment of staff would be best used in another section that talks about the appointments to boards and committees.
Okay, that cleared it up for me. Any comments on the part of our committee on this one? Let me just say, Russ.
Yeah, I am definitely confused. I interpreted the memo as, the meat of this issue was that the town administrator, the language around the town administrator having the ability to appoint and remove all department heads, officers, and employees, including those who were not necessarily under the jurisdiction of the select board, with the proviso that the committee that's affected by that appointment or removal would basically be able to approve or disapprove of that action. So that, to me, was the meaty part, as opposed to the statement about being a registered town voter, etc. So I suppose maybe this is like, there are three things nestled in this one item. Maybe it would make sense to tease them apart and address them specifically.
Yeah, Russ, I think you're right. I mean, this is really getting at the meat of this. You're right. It's not about, is really around the town administrator may not appoint or remove persons serving under an elected board and committee unless the affected board and committee has approved the action by majority of vote. And I don't know if we need to say in advance, but I would suspect that would be helpful. But I think that's the beef here. So I think you're right. Any other comments?
Yeah, I think what they're saying is people on the Conservation Commission, it's an appointed committee with a Board of Appeals, that they must be citizens and registered voters.
Mm-hmm.
That type of thing.
So that language is not in the language for discussion. Are you proposing that language be added to make sure we don't lose that? right? So
Well, if you're talking in paragraph C, the first couple of words in the line 3 says it's limited to what the under the jurisdiction of the select board.
right.
If
Which
you're
includes
looking at
elected
the
boards.
Right.
the
I'm looking at the
proposed
proposed
language.
language.
In the memo, look at that. What's on the screen, Jack? Language for discussion.
I can't read what's on the screen. It's too small.
Do you have the memo
Anthony,
printed?
can you? Anthony, can you make that larger, please, so everybody can see it? Okay. How about? Can people see it now? We all see it? Anybody not see it? Okay. So what's happening is this is changing. The proposal is that we change it, that it stays the same. All department heads.
Was this sent out to us?
Employees. Yes.
This is the memo that the Collins Center provided.
Dated February 18th?
February 20th.
The memo
Well,
February 20th.
Friday.
The attachment, though, I think is still labeled 218.
Okay. Yeah.
But yes, also there's a 221.
Well, I've looked at the
Betsy sent it on February 20th. Subject line, Collins discussion memo on the town administrator section of the charter. Email dated February 20th. Memo dated February 20th.
Maybe it would be useful for Anthony to go through his points of discussion, because that's sort of what was leading the discussion, I thought.
Yeah, I agree.
So yeah, let me so I'm just gonna scroll down to the discussion section, which is 3 paragraphs. So the current language, I don't want to just read this because you got it in front, but I'll read it. Some people haven't seen the memo. So the current language ties the administrator's appointment authority to the select board's jurisdictional scope. That's the current language. And in this case, we're talking specifically about staff appointments, employees. So the current language, the town administrator can appoint or remove staff that can be appointed by the select board. As the charter evolves, the town administrator's role expands. This framing may create ambiguity about who has authority over positions that do not neatly fall within the select board's traditional jurisdiction. Reframing the administrator as the default appointing authority provides a cleaner structural framework and avoids gaps. The proposed language also adds explicit procedural protections for staff serving under elected boards, which the current language does not clearly address. Requiring a majority approval for the affected boards before the administrator can appoint or remove such staff protects both the board's independence and the employees in question. The last paragraph, which I think is causing the group to get a little bit tripped up, is the committee may also wish to consider whether the residency and voter registration requirements for boards and committee appointees, these are the people serving on the boards, not the staff supporting the boards, should be relocated to the general provisions article of the charter for consistency and ease of reference, as it applies more broadly than the administrator staff appointments. So your current language mixes in some language around, so any person appointed by the administration to any statutory board, committee, and commission. So these are not the staff that support the boards, committees, or commissions. These are the members on the boards, committees, or commissions. And so, our suggestion is to hone this in, make this paragraph strictly about the staff, so we can talk about that. And then if we need to add some language around, if you want to give the administrator any appointing authority to any boards or committees, we would do that in a separate paragraph.
Does that make sense to everybody?
If I read that correctly, it said the administrator appoint or remove staff of the independent elected board. If the administrator doesn't agree with who the independent board wants to appoint, he doesn't appoint, and therefore the independent board is denied appointing the person of their choice. So I have a problem with the appointing part. as far as the removal, the consultation with the board on the removal of a person, that doesn't pose the same problem as the appointing problem.
Yeah, I guess I don't see the appointing problem there.
It was in the discussion, paragraph 2, line 3 of the discussion. If Anthony, if you could scroll so I can see the second paragraph of the discussion. Okay, yeah. So in the third line, it says the affected board, before the administrator can appoint or remove such staff person. So it still has the appointing authority of the independent board staff resting with the administrator.
Well, I think the intent here was to give the boards, the elected boards, the authority to hire or terminate. You know, the ultimate decision maker comes from them. I think that was the objective on this.
It also could be clear that the line says the town administrator shall appoint and remove blah, 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 all department heads for whom no other method of appointment is provided in the charter. So kind of to Anthony's point, it's providing a default state for how appointments and removals occur unless otherwise specified. And so that's where when we get to the elected boards where we want to make sure that they have the appointment power, you'd clarify it there. And therefore, it's kind of making it, I think one of the things that I think this was intended to address from the feedback we got was that there was unclarity about how all this works out in lots of different angles.
Mm-hmm.
And at least for appointment and removal, this would help to make that much more clear. But you're right, we got to make sure we do the other half, which is in the elected boards to make sure that we explicitly retain the powers that we want them to have in those positions for appointments and removals.
Any other comments about that? I'm looking across to see if anybody has any comments on that. So just to make sure I understand where we are in that, we'll look at the suggested wording, the language that is being proposed, this language for discussion. And I think we're saying, Russell, I think what you're saying is, let's use this language and let's make sure that when we get to the elected boards and committees, let's be very clear about their authority at that point. But this is just enabling language here that will allow that to happen when we get there. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think it's about trying to make sure that there are no gaps. And so this does pose the risk of if we don't, correctly make appointing authority in the elected committees, then it would default to the administrator, but at least then there is an answer to what happens.
Okay. And
we end up with conflicting authority within the charter,
which we don't want
conflicts.
So by putting this in and then we go and do the authority, then we, I think, should make note that this is another one of the paragraphs we're going to come back and check and make sure that in the context of what we've done in terms of identifying the responsibilities under different elected boards, that this now makes sense. Does that make sense to everybody? I mean, is that okay?
Yeah, that's fair.
Okay. So let's vote on, I'm going to propose that we vote to approve the language as proposed by Anthony and Pat here under language for discussion. We approve that with a note in the margin saying and highlighting that we will come back and review this once again once we complete the elected board discussions to make sure that we have covered everything that and that we don't have any gaps. Okay, so why don't I go around and see, unless anybody has any issues with what I propose, then let's see, and that is 3, 4. Matt,
Yes.
Corey,
Yes.
Nikki,
Yes.
Jack,
I will abstain.
why? Sorry.
Why?
Yeah. We'll come back to that. Steve,
Yes.
Wes,
Yes.
Eileen,
Yes.
Jess,
Yes.
that's a yes. Jack, what is the issue here for you?
I think it's leaving too much to chance that we're going to have a vagueness here that we've got to correct later.
Do you have a counter proposal?
No, it's a chicken or an egg. Which one do we do first? So I just don't
All
want
right.
to approve
Okay.
this, and we'll come back later and
Okay.
make it
Again,
compatible with what I think is more important, the powers of the independently elected boards.
correct. Yeah, well, I think that's the intent of what we're going to be doing here, and we'll make note of that. Okay. All right. Next discussion area.
So the next area is 3-4D. This section, it is already language that's from your bylaw, which talks about the select board having the authority essentially to ratify the appointments of the town administrator. It provides 15 days for that ratification to take place. We recommend keeping this ratification authority. One thing that I was discussing with Pat earlier today was around clarifying, maybe adding a clause here that this should only apply to appointments that the appointments that aren't appointments made by the elected boards. So that's a clause that we could add in here to just clarify that this is for all the other appointments that aren't that don't have any other appointing authority from an elected board or something of that nature. But this is essentially about just keeping this language and possibly for the committee's discussion, adding in that clarification that this does not affect appointments for elected boards. If the elected board ratifies the appointment, then the select board doesn't have to.
Comment? Anybody?
Typically, when the town administrator makes an appointment, they sometimes ask the select board to waive the 15-day requirement and have the appointment effective immediately, and that's very commonly done. And this language doesn't provide for that option.
Why is this here?
This is language that you currently have in your bylaws. When we see this language, this is to provide usually a check and balance so that the select board is reviewing and perhaps rejecting when where appropriate staff appointments that it doesn't think are appropriate. That's usually where we see it. So this is something that you currently have. And that's usually the cases where there's the concern about sort of having a check and balance against the town administrator.
Well, I definitely think if we're going to continue this language, we need to put language in saying that the select board can't have the authority to put the nix on an appointment for an elected board. Like, I think that's, in my opinion, it would be only for the boards under their purview. Like we've had language before, is like only for the the departments or the areas under their that fall under their organizational structure or whatever words we've used in the past on that the 15-day thing happens. But I don't know how you get the best way to get there, because I think having the select board have the authority to put the kibosh on an elected board would just not be appropriate.
If the committee wants us to, we can craft some language to present it for the next meeting. We just represent that generally. Again, unless you don't want to, I assume that the committee would want there to be a check and balance against the town administrator's appointments. But we can also add a clause in there about that this does not apply to the appointments for the elected boards and so on.
Yeah, one suggestion just off the cuff that I would have, it's names of persons appointed by the town administrator to positions within the select board's jurisdiction shall be transmitted in writing. And then with respect to Jack's comment, what I've seen in other language, you could say for the 15 days shall be effective on the 15th day following the day within said period by a unless the board by a majority votes to approve or reject any such appointment. So, for example, the board could approve or reject it within that 15 days. Because when you're talking about waiving, sometimes the board, makes their decision earlier and just approves it.
The language that is used at select board meetings is waiving the 15-day waiting period.
Right.
That's very common. That's right. What they use
so
now.
We can say within such period, votes to reject any such appointment. How about votes to reject any such appointment or votes to waive the 15-day period?
Can I just ask, the language says names of persons appointed by the town administrator shall be transmitted. Wouldn't it be redundant to say within the select board's jurisdiction? I have more of a question, I guess, that I'm trying to sort of formulate, but it goes back to the previous conversation that we had and maybe we just need to come back to this, but if the elected boards are going to have jurisdiction over their hires, the town administrator is only already hiring people or recommending for hire people that are under the select boards in the town administrator's jurisdiction, right? So if we added that language in, I suppose it's belt and suspenders, but also it seems redundant.
Well, the town administrator has, under this revised language, the town administrator has expanded appointment authority because the language was changed to, if you go back to, go back to C, it is
if we're
all
no other
department
method
heads,
of appointment. Yeah.
Exactly. So it's so it could be broader.
Yeah.
All right, then I agree with that change that Pat recommended.
Yeah, I do too. Pat, can you I'm putting you on the spot. We'll see. Putting the language in the chat like you did before, if that's possible, so we can kind of see it, so it reflects what it is we're talking about, so we can, see it. It's a good sheet. It's good that you're very adept at this.
Adept but slow. It'll give you a minute.
I think it'll be help if we just see it, then we can.
Yep.
With those caveats in it.
Okay.
So I have a question. What happens when someone leaves, let's say from the Board of Health or something, an elected position, and so they find someone to fill that slot? Is that, how does that work vis-a-vis this thing, this paragraph? I mean, are they appointed? I mean, they're filling in until they run for election, I guess, or something, but so it's sort of an interim.
I don't know that that would apply here because that would be the Board of Health would appoint an interim, not the select board or whatever.
So is that right? So they just go on and do their own thing and
until the next election. I guess
Not
we have
exactly.
to get there.
May I interject?
Yeah, please.
The way that has worked in the past, Eileen, say someone leaves the planning board midterm,
yeah.
there is a process that we go through and candidates, submit resumes and they're interviewed. And then the candidate has to be approved by a majority of the elected board and the select board. So in the case of planning board, there are 7 planning board members, there are 5 select board members, and they have a joint meeting at which they consider the candidates and vote that new candidate in who serves then just until the next election.
Yes.
That's the way it's happened in the past. I'm not saying that's the way it should always be. I just thought it would be helpful for everyone to know that's how it's been done.
Thank you, Barbara.
Yeah, it's not to say that's the way it's written either.
True.
And we should probably, when we get to the elected boards, make sure that we cover that part.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
given that there's definitely sections as we've been going through where vacancies are called out for different elements, I would imagine that will happen for elected boards as well.
Yeah, I think that I agree with that.
Okay.
Okay, so you can see here, Pat has put in the wording. Here, names of persons appointed by the town administrator to positions within the select board's jurisdiction shall be transmitted in writing, blah, blah, blah. 15th day following the day, which is filled, unless said board shall within said period by majority vote reject any such appointment or vote to waive the 15-day period.
Yeah. That works.
Okay. Any comments on this wording or suggestions or issues with it? Or are we ready to move on just to vote on it? I don't see any people with any comments. Okay, so all right. Matt?
Yes.
Corey? I think you're on mute, Corey. Yes.
Oh,
Thank you.
Sorry. Yeah.
That's
yes.
Okay. Nikki?
Yes.
Jack?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Thank you. Russell?
Yes.
Eileen?
Yes.
Jess?
Yes.
Okay, that's a yes. Okay, great. Unanimous on that one. Okay. Do a time check. We've got 8:21, and the next area we're going to go to is the language 64E. Let's give it a shot. Maybe this is easy. Anthony, you want to put the language up for discussion?
Yeah. Is it showing?
No.
Let's see.
No. All right.
So this is actually language that the committee vote based on a vote of the committee at its January 27th meeting, where it wanted to give the town administrator the responsibility over the human resources policies of the town. The way that the language was crafted was that the administrator shall administer the human resources policy, we heard in our conversation with Betsy that it was to allow them to create and administer the policy. So that is the major change here in the revised language, with requiring an approval by the select board, however, of any policy created by the town administrator.
The only question I had was whether enforcement should be part of that as well.
We can add the word enforce as well. It would be said administrator shall create, subject to the select board approval, enforce and administer.
And that way it's consistent with the technology policy. The IT policy has that.
This language is in the February 20th version.
The January 27th, I couldn't hear you, Jack.
Language that's on the screen is in the February 20th version. Draft.
The
Because I
top
spent
line
a lot of
that
time
says,
marking up the February 18th version. I don't know when the 20th, it's.
This is the discussion guide. We haven't.
The last version of the charter that would have been submitted to the committee, I believe, has this language because it was based on the vote that the committee took in January. So the current language is based on the vote that the committee took in January.
That's not my question. The draft I'm looking at is dated February 18th, but I think I heard earlier that there was a February 20th version, which is why I'm having some problem.
That's just the date that the
reconciling.
email was sent, Jack.
Yeah,
The
well,
February 20th is the memo. The charter is the 18th, I believe, and the memo is the 20th, right?
Correct.
Is that what you're talking
Yes.
about?
And that,
Yes.
and that changed, and that changed some of the language from the February 18th draft.
so each
So
week
no
we're
change
getting,
has been.
sorry, each week we're getting new updated language of a charter and we're getting a memo. And the charter definitely is being updated week to week. So the one that we all got does have changes from the one that we had, 2 weeks prior. But the memo also outlines, at least for this part, where the language is currently and where the discussion was aimed at for the potential change.
I'm looking at what's on the screen, language for discussion, and that seems different from what is in the February 18th.
Correct. We haven't made any changes
that
to the
paragraph.
draft. Correct. We haven't made any changes to the draft. We present the language for discussion for the committee to mull over and decide if it wants to include or modify what's in the draft based on the discussion. So if you look at, it's got current language. The current language is what should be in your draft of the charter.
I have a comment. So I take things very literally. And when it says administer the first line and administer the human resources systems of said town, and then later collective bargaining agreements. So has it been defined that the town doesn't include the schools? I'm not sure how to quite ask that question, but when I see town, I think the school's part of the town. Collective bargaining agreements, yeah. Is that everybody? Is teachers included?
That's
Right,
a good question. We can actually, I think me and Pat have discussed it. I thought it was like in the bottom of the memo. We can actually add that the schools are excluded from this.
I think we should
actually go through the other paragraph as well.
Yep. I think we had talked about excluding the schools in the language.
Including, excluding, yeah.
But yes, to that point. Okay, so if we added the exclusion of the schools here, are there any other issues with this language? Anybody have any comments about it?
I guess my only question, and I apologize if this is belaboring the point, but there is a human resources department. And so I guess a delineation of where the town administrator's responsibility sort of envelops that or is separate from that. I don't know how to quite phrase that question.
Well, the HR department reports to the town administrator.
Right. And so I guess they just have
they're
ultimate
ultimately
authority
responsible.
and responsibility. Okay.
Yep. So it's kind of things trickling up through, you know, he's got responsibility. Doesn't mean he has to do everything.
Right. Yeah. That's always what I think of as like, he has to do he or she has to do all of this work, but it's just the authority and responsibility.
Right.
I guess this is sort of answered as well, maybe, but I'm definitely not sure if we need to say something. So my understanding is there currently is an HR under the town administrator, and is there also one under the school department? That's an additional.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so, obviously, this section is talking about the powers of the town administrator. But if I think a little bit to the future, where there's going to be a section that I assume spends a little bit of effort talking about the school department, how will these two play together in some way that makes sense? You know, imagine two different resource departments obviously made different decisions or had different nuanced details or whatnot. I guess it would just be clear that a portion of the town would fall under one set of human resources decisions and roles and enforcement, and a portion of, the school committee or the school department and everything else would fall under another one. Is that likely how this would shake out? Question?
I would
based
suspect.
on what I'm.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, based on what I'm hearing, the short answer is yes. So we'd carve out the school department here, and then there'll be schools are heavily regulated by state law, so there would be a small school department section here, which would say that basically, for most things, the school department is exempt from the direct management of the town administrator and the select board and things of that nature.
Did that answer your question, Russ?
Yeah, I guess the deeper thing that I'm sensing is it seems odd that we might have two separate sets of policies that may apply it in different ways. That said, I'm pretty sure state law has some outlines of how there's sort of separation for school departments and things.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe even if that was true, I'm thinking, do we need to add something about, I don't know, consultation with the two or something silly? But no matter what, I don't think that belongs in charter language. And that might be something that, we look at for bylaw recommendation if necessary. So I'm content.
Okay, great. Anybody else want to discuss any more of this? Raise your hand, please, if you do. Okay. Then I'm going to propose that we accept this language as amended, where we add.
That's Betsy. If for this language, we can take what we've heard from the committee. We can come back and redraft it in the next version of the memo, which will have the sections we haven't done and just the revised version, so people can see exactly what it will look like with the changes, rather than trying to adopt a amendment that hasn't been typed up at this moment.
Works if that's what you'd like to do.
I think we'd maybe also like to check in and make sure that you do have two separate HR departments. I find that many towns are different. I believe yours are separate. Oftentimes, things like benefits are managed in the HR department for the town, for both towns and schools. Before we, vote on excluding the school from this language, I would just like to check in and make sure they do, in fact, operate their own HR.
I think that's great. Let's update it next time and come back to it. Thank you. Okay, well, if that's the case, then we have gotten through a bunch of this document, but we're not quite done yet. We still have a little bit more to go, and so we'll bring that into next time, and then we'll hopefully at the next meeting finish the town administrator section of this, and then we can move on to the the next. I know this has been a lot. There's been a lot of preparation, etc. And appreciate it. So I think next time we'll have a updated charter. We'll have the discussion memo, which will have the parts we've already decided on removed. The one that we just discussed on the human resources stuff modified and updated with some facts about what's going on in terms of the schools versus the town. And then the rest of it will be the same, and we'll get into the budget preparation and documentation and the town facilities and equipment. And I don't know, Anthony, what your thoughts are about whether we could maybe start on the elected boards and committees at that next one as well.
The plan, or what we were hoping to do, is to go through, and again, this, what you have now is based on what was in your bylaws. There are some other duties and powers of a town administrator that aren't in your bylaws, so we just want to run those by the committee to see if you'd like to include those. So if we get, I anticipate just at the pace we're going, we may, I'm gonna knock on wood here, may finish the town administrator section next meeting, but it would include some things that we have, like a spreadsheet of, like, here's some things that you don't have that you may want to consider as a committee.
Okay, so we will finish the town administrator next time and plan on kicking off. So that next meeting will be in early March, and then we'll end up March and the end of March going into the elected committees. All right, so anything else before we adjourn? If not, I will take a motion.
So moved.
A second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor by raising hands, please. Okay, that's it. Thank you very much, everybody.
All right.
Have a good night. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, everybody.
And
Bye.